hearts rumbling, won't fumble it, raise it high. High time is right now, so let's shine. We go hard, one heart, one mind. This one is ours for the taking, baby, it's showtime. This one is ours for the taking, baby, it's showtime.
Hello there, RotoBallers, and welcome back. This is week 2 of the NFL DFS Roundtable. This week, I'm joined by Joe Nicely once again, who was with us week 1. Welcome back, Joe.
Hey, Dan. Good to see you again, man.
Absolutely. I hope you don't mind having my South Carolina hat on. I know that you're probably not a huge fan of that.
Painful down here in Knoxville.
I don't have any allegiance. It's a cool hat that I got when I was at a coaching clinic down there. Back when Spurrier was coaching there, actually, it was kind of fun. But yeah, no ill intent there. And then we have John Brubaker joining us. John, why don't you introduce yourself and let these guys know what you're doing for us at RotoBaller?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm John Brubaker, everybody. Nice to be talking to you guys. Nice to be talking to you, Dan and Joe, as well. If you see me on Twitter, I'm Lucid Media DFS. I do MLB premium picks each day for sports betting for RotoBaller, as well as a couple of DFS picks in the free section for RotoBaller a couple times a week, and then NFL showdowns Monday, Thursday, and Sunday Night Football, and looking to get some NBA stuff as well this year. And just happy to be here. It's been a couple months now. I'm having the time of my life, and
That's awesome.
Can't wait to make some more money. Can't wait to make some of you guys some more money as well.
Hope so.
And just get after it. I love DFS and sports betting like it's my job, because it kind of is sometimes. But so I'm just ready to get after it, ready to help you guys out, and I'm happy to be here tonight.
Awesome, man. We're glad you're happy with us, and I'm looking forward to NBA season as well. Here, it's coming up sooner than we think. And of
Right
course,
around the corner.
Yeah, of course, we have PGA starting back up again. Joe, I know you had like a week off, and now you're back at it, all just like that.
Yeah, man. The golf season never ends, Dan. It's a grind that doesn't stop. We had a week off and kicked off the 2021-22 season this week, actually. So really excited about that. We're going to grind right through it over at RotoBaller, and I always try to encourage people to sign up for our PGA Premium at this time of year because you're getting basically the whole next calendar year all the way through the 2022 Tour Championship when you sign up right now. It's an amazing deal. You can use my promo code NICE, NICE, and get our PGA Premium package for less than $65. And it's our cheapest deal of the year. Our prices always go up in January, kind of when things get hot and heavy. So really encourage people, if you got any interest in golf, check us out right now. Absolutely.
I mean, your content and the PGA product in general, I always think is impressive, and you guys do such a great job with that. I would encourage anybody to check out not only the PGA, but we have our NFL Premium package right now. It's $99.99 for the full season. You get access to all of our premium articles, our tools, our optimizer, just everything. And it's just really an incredible deal at that price. And then, of course, we have a ton of different multi-sport packages that you could access there for. You can get golf, you can get everything from esports to NASCAR. If you get all of our multi-sport packages, and again, just everything you possibly want here, we're covering for DFS and betting at RotoBaller. So I want to say this. Last week, I just want to let you know, I wore my Steelers shirt, and then the Steelers pulled off this road upset against the Bills last week. And so I'm wearing another Steelers shirt. I'm a little bit superstitious, why not, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you're wondering, I got the Jack Lambert throwback here for the defense, bringing the heat. But maybe we'll talk about that.
You gotta wear the exact same shirt, Dan.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to do whatever I can to throw some goodwill or some good mojo for them, because they have another the Raiders should be a tough match this week. But let's kind of should go back to week 1. And obviously the Steelers were a bit of a surprise, but where else, from looking back at week 1, where were we good and where were we bad? What kind of things did we get right and wrong? Joe, you were with me on the show last week. What was something that you were all over and got right, or a place that you maybe whiffed?
Yeah, the one I'm kind of kicking myself over, Dan, was in retrospect probably the most obvious one. That's the Kansas City Chiefs. Had very little of them. especially when you consider kind of their ownership overall. Just one of those obvious plays, going with the Chiefs stack there, maybe run it back with the Cleveland Brown. Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, that offense is so concentrated that I still kind of kicking myself over missing that one. As far as what we got right, we spent a lot of time last week talking about Marquez Callaway. We kind of like the idea of playing him in cash and fading him in GPPs because he was getting so popular. And that proved to be a good call as he kind of busted out there as the chalk and really could get you some leverage in GPPs if you faded Callaway.
No doubt. John, speaking of cash, I know you're a pretty heavy cash volume player. Is there, looking back at your own cash lineups or GPP lineups, is there, a build, a player that you were higher on or lower on than you should have been looking back?
So yeah, kind of on the flip side, I know you guys said, talking about playing Callaway in cash and then fade them in GPPs. Well, I played him in cash and he busted, to be frank about it. And I mentioned it, it's just every single week, of every single year, there's always going to be that one chalk guy that just absolutely busts. And last week it was Callaway. It's always hindsight being 2020, but he did have a tough matchup against the Packers, despite the Saints scoring 38 points. But, it was kind of one of those, who would have thought, Saints score 38, Jameis throws 5 touchdowns, and Callaway gets 2.4 points or whatever it was on DraftKings and 1.9 on FanDuel. So that's just kind of how it goes. It's just the volatility of sports in general, especially in football. What I did get right, though, is, surprisingly on FanDuel, I didn't expect it, but the Chiefs were kind of higher owned than most other teams on the slate, specifically Mahomes and Hill and Kelsey. And I did have Kelsey in my lineup, but I did pivot off of Mahomes to Kyler Murray. I stacked Kyler and DeAndre Hopkins. I just figured that Arizona-Tennessee game was going to be a shootout, which it almost turned out to be, except, a little
Tennessee
short on the end of Tennessee, but yeah,
Joe.
But Kyler certainly did his part with 5 total touchdowns, and that really is what set me apart from the field.
Nice.
I got him at 12%, and 36 points from your quarterback is never something to sniff at. So
yeah, he was my slate breaker on the cheat sheet this week. I just really thought he had a lot of upside in GPPs, and Hopkins I ended up playing in cash over Ridley, which worked out well. But looking back on it too, I kicked myself for not having more Joe Mixon. I wrote him up as this pivot off, and everyone, a lot of the guys that are on our season long staff were all over a big bounce back here from Mixon and talking about how he was going to be a workhorse. And then he goes and gets 33 touches and has a huge game. So I thought I was going to have a lot of Joe Mixon. Then I look at my lineups on Sunday and I was smashing in too much Dalvin Cook and Kamara on these other guys. So a little bit upset about that. But anyways, let's move along to our next topic. I want to talk kind of going from week 1 into week 2. What are some of the overreaction spots? Like, I think there are going to be naturally, especially when you look at those, like, points per game, you go to FanDuel and it's like, hey, this guy, Kyler Murray is averaging 36 points a game. People look at those game logs and they're like, all right, who are some of these guys that maybe either overperformed or just had a huge week that might be setting up for some regression, or perhaps some guys who busted in week 1 that we can look at in week 2. John, I'm going to start with you this time.
Yeah. So if you've been on Twitter at all this week, I'm sure you've seen just about every season-long fantasy guy and their mother all tweet about how Eli Mitchell, you shouldn't be spending all your FOB on Eli Mitchell, this, that, and the other thing. But he's the guy I'm choosing this week. I feel like this will be more popular in tournaments than it will in cash, but I guarantee people are going to go back to the well with him. And the truth of it is twofold. One, with San Francisco, you just never know who's going to get the touches there. Every running back, it's plug and play, really. They just throw a guy back there and he ends up getting, 15 carries, 80 yards and 2 touchdowns or whatever. And if Trey Sermon's active this week, that changes everything as far as Eli Mitchell goes. Just adds another wrinkle into the fold. And not only that, Philly does have a tough matchup, or San Francisco has a tough matchup against Philly, I should say, as Philly had a negative 18.2 DVOA against the rush last season. Atlanta got the ball rolling a little bit with the run game early on, but Philly adjusted, and then eventually Atlanta had to start throwing the ball a little bit more. But yeah, I'm off of Eli Mitchell, I'm off of Trey Sermon, I'm off all those San Francisco running backs this week. I just don't think they're there's a good spot for them to hit value.
I like that call. Joe, who are you perhaps thinking is a play or a fade based on week one?
Yeah, I like John's call as well. Really hard to trust that Kyle Shanahan backfield. So I like John's thoughts on that. I think kind of a deceiving stat line if you're just going through and looking at game logs. One that could really throw you off is Melvin Gordon. Had 101 yards and a touchdown. Looks good at the end of the day, but when you dig in, 70 yards in the TD came on one play, and basically split carries and snaps with Javonte Williams all day. I think it was the snap totals there were 32 and 34. So this is a classic 50-50 backfield. Nothing I want a part of, even though Gordon ended up with a good week one.
Yeah, I would agree there. And I think the general buzz around the industry is that, the rookie Williams is a much more talented runner and is going to, eventually take that job from Melvin Gordon. But and it's a good matchup, Jacksonville this week, but it's really messing with fire because, like you said, there's no way to predict who's going to, if they just go like a hot hand approach or a 50-50, same kind of thing with San Francisco. My guy that I wanted to talk about was Jameis Winston, who I wrote him up and I was on him, and then I look at my lineups and I really didn't have him, and he was super cheap, and then he throws 5 touchdowns, but he threw him on 20 attempts, like what, 14 for 20 for 5 touchdowns. It's just that's not sustainable. The Saints want to run the ball. They're not going to be, that efficient throwing the football. So I'm not saying he's a bad play by any means, but I don't think you're going to see a 5 touchdown effort from Jameis Winston again, which is one of the reasons why I'm going back to Kamara, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. All right. So speaking of Kamara and some of these, we usually talk about running backs. We tend to talk about running backs in this next segment, but when you're building your cash game lineups and you have a stud that you want to build around and you're going to pay up for, who's that going to be? Joe, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, Dan, you brought his name up, Alvin Kamara. I was on Christian McCaffrey last week. I know you like Kamara, but I'm like going with the Saints back this week, man. 8.6 week one, only a $200 price bump in week 2, and he had 20 carries last week, which was tied for the second most in his NFL career. We hope that when Latavius Murray was let go by the Saints prior to the season, that Kamara would finally kind of take over everything out of the backfield, and that looks to be the case. So I'm really comfortable going with him. Not a bit worried about this Carolina Panthers defense. They shut down the Jets last, but was that really tell you? I think volume's going to be there for Kamara, and he's certainly got a ton of talent.
No doubt. And that he had a real fluky low catch, 3 catches last week, and he sat most of the fourth quarter when the blowout. So, I mean, it's really hard to judge that performance. If it's a close game, he probably gets a lot more touches and a lot more opportunities. John, I'm going to throw it over to you here. Who's your guy?
So I'm going to go on the other side of that game. I'm going to go with CMC. I wasn't a part of the panel last week, obviously. So, Joe, I didn't know that you were on him last week, but to point out what he did last week. I mean, coming back from last year, obviously didn't play much, if at all, if I remember correctly, with his injury.
3 games.
But he came back and came back, played 90% of the snaps last week. Saw every single rushing attempt for the team. They didn't give the ball to anybody else, and actually got 9 targets, or a 27% target share last week out of the backfield. We didn't really get a good gauge of the Saints' rush defense just because game script depended on, Green Bay throwing the ball. So we don't really know what they are. I'm assuming they're going to be pretty good. They typically are pretty good, and any team that gives up 3 points in week 1 is pretty good. But, I'm going to go with CMC. I just think the volume's there. I think he's a 10K player. He's a 10K player this week, but I know he's going to jump up 10.5K, 11K, especially on FanDuel towards, week 5, 6, 7. So you might want to get him now when he's cheap.
Yeah, I totally get it, especially
cheap, I guess I should say.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it, especially on DraftKings with PPR. Like he had those 9 catches, or it was 8 or 9 catches, right? And
9. I don't know how many catches. I knew he had 9 targets, so for sure.
Yeah, I think he had 9. He may have had 9. He caught all of his targets, I think, because he had 20 plus carries, 9 catches. Regardless, he has this incredible floor, right? And like you said, the Saints are, even if they shut down the run game, traditional run game, they're going to scheme the ball out of the backfield. It's what they do. So I totally get it. I'll probably echo Joe with Kamara, and then just say that I'm probably going back to Dalvin Cook. He didn't have the best game. In fact, he had a costly fumble there in overtime that ended up losing him the game. But he's still their guy. And Arizona, I know they shut down Derrick Henry last week, but I still don't think that is a good defense. And like both Kamara and CMC, Cook's a guy that gets the ball, the backfield, 6 catches last week. He's got a huge floor too, and a huge ceiling. We've seen him pop off before. So we'll round out the panel again this week with Kamara, Cook, and CMC. Those were our 3 last week as well.
Yeah.
It's hard to get away from
I
those
assume that'll
guys.
be a trend for the rest of the year as well.
I mean, it's just how do you get away from those guys with their just touch and target monsters?
Yeah.
I'll toss another guy out there, Dan. Maybe not considered high price, but just to go outside of those 3. We haven't talked about the guy that led all running backs in opportunities last week, Joe Mixon.
Yeah,
33 total opportunities, 7K on DraftKings. We're talking about a guy that's one of the very few 3-down backs in the NFL at the moment. So I think volume is king, obviously in cash. So you can certainly give Mixon a look if you don't feel like getting all the way up there to CMC, Kamara, Dalvin.
And I do think it's going to be tough. And this kind of parlays right into our next little our segment here on value. But I do think it's going to be a lot tougher to jam studs in. I had some lineups where I could fit Kamara, Cook, and CMC last week on DraftKings, and I don't think you're going to be able to do that this week with the value kind of disappearing. So, having said that, are there some guys when we're talking value, we're talking 3,500, 400, 4,000, 4,500 on DraftKings, in that 5 to 6K range on FanDuel? Who are some guys that are value guys that we think we can trust this week for cash builds or really for GPP builds too? We'll start with John this time.
So if I'm going cash, I have him listed as the ultimate chalk play this week. But I should say that I thought he was going to be extremely chalky last week, and he actually turned out to be kind of middle of the pack. Najee Harris, he gathers a decent matchup against Las Vegas this week. They did allow a 7.2 yard per carry to Tyson Williams last week in the first half, especially. You kind of saw he just was running the ball all over them. I was surprised that he didn't see the ball as much in the second half. I know they were kind of still just working him into the offense, given their the injuries to their backfield. But yeah, I mean, this could be the week that Harris breaks out. Obviously, you're concerned about the Pittsburgh offensive line and what he can do behind there, and that was kind of why I was soft on him in season-long drafts. I was just kind of worried that Pittsburgh offensive line might not be able to hold up for him, and that is my concern, but I do think he's going to get the volume. He's going to be maybe not a 3-down back on every drive, but he did play. What do I have here? He played 100% of the snaps.
I was going to say every snap.
Yeah, and he garnered 16 touches in a game that was low scoring. This one should turn out a little bit higher scoring than obviously that Pittsburgh Buffalo game. So for 6.1 on FanDuel, especially, it's going to be so hard to get away from him, especially like you said, with little to no value really this week. He's going to be your guy.
I hope you're right. Just for my own personal fandom, and I think I'll have some shares. I keep waiting to see how they're going to scheme him the ball in space too, because they really are. They're really getting Ben involved in the short passing game a lot. They throw a lot of those wide receiver screens, and I mean, and I saw them. They split him out wide a few times last week, so. Hopefully they use him a little bit like a Kamara, and they get him the ball on the perimeter where in the flats where he can do some damage. And he did have a few nice runs there towards the end of the game too, I thought. So I'm with you on Najee. Joe, who are you looking at?
In cash last week, it's kind of the week of the cheap wide receiver, right? This week we're looking at some pretty dramatic price increases at that position. One guy kind of stayed the same price though, only a $200 price bump. Jamar Chase, the Cincinnati, had a solid performance, looked really good. Kind of concerned with some preseason drops, but that turned out not to be an issue. He played 90% of the snaps for this team. Had a very nice ADOT, 16.3, 114 total air yards, and just right there at 5K. So I think you can give Jamar Chase a look in cash.
Yeah, I like that a lot. He was the one guy I was not sure about. I had a lot of Higgins last week. I had some Tyler Boyd, and then everyone was kind of just holding their breath with Chase. And then, of course, he had a great game. And all three of those guys could be really interesting plays this year. I'm looking at going back to the Bills. I think the Bills are, in a good spot to bounce back. They really struggled against the Steelers, but the Steelers defense is good. And not that the Dolphins are bad, but I don't think they're going to be able to put the same kind of pressure on Josh Allen this week. And I think we'll see Josh Allen have some success in the passing game. So my guy or guys would be Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley down there. Both of those guys had a huge chunk of targets, 8 targets for Sanders, 13 for Beasley. I think Sanders played 90% of the snaps. They're going to throw the ball a ton. They really don't run the ball well, and they don't really care to run the ball. So I think they're going to have to throw the ball. And both those guys, are possession receivers, check down guys that Allen can throw the ball to. And in a PPR format like Sanders for 4K on DK, he went 4 for 52 last week. That's 9 points. I'll live with that as a floor, and I think he could do more than that, obviously. So going from receivers, we're going to move into quarterbacks. And last week we talked about cheap quarterbacks. There's a whole bunch of them. And then this week I look and I don't see a whole bunch of cheap quarterbacks, but I see a whole bunch of like kind of mid-tier, upper mid-tier quarterbacks in great spots. And so I have these 4 guys circled, and I feel like they're going to be pretty popular. And I'm curious as to who you like the best. Let's just go with this. Who you like the best first of this grouping. We got Tom Brady against Atlanta. And Atlanta's probably having nightmares about the Super Bowl when that last time they faced Tom Brady. We got Russell Wilson against the Tennessee team that just got hammered by Kyler. And then you have Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert facing each other in that shootout or potential shootout with a 55-point total. So, Joe, I'm going to start with you. Who of those 4, and I think I know the answer based on your article, but who do you like of those 4?
Yeah, there's probably not a bad play in the bunch, Dan. My favorite, though, is definitely Dak Prescott. This Dallas offense is going to run through him. I know he had 58 attempts in week 1, but that's maybe not that much of an outlier considering last year in the 5 games he played, he averaged just a tick over 44 pass attempts a game. I love that amount of volume. Love this offense, and with the terrible defense on the Cowboys, we're going to see a lot of shootouts, and I wouldn't expect to see anything less this week.
Yep, I kind of thought that you were going to say based on your article I read this morning. John, of those 4, are you with Joe on Dak, or you have a different guy?
No, I'm actually going to go with Russell Wilson. Just based on matchups, you can't go wrong with any of those guys without a doubt, and that's why they'll likely be popular this week. I just think Russell Wilson against Tennessee. Tennessee is just brutal back there. Their back 7 has just been atrocious since the beginning of last season. Really. Last week they allowed 5 total touchdowns, 289 and 4 in the air, and just I don't see that changing this week. Between DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, and AJ Green for Arizona last week, or DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and even guys like Gerald Everett, in the tight end positions,
sure.
This week with Seattle. I just think Russ is going to eat. He's going to, and he's always seemed like a first half of the season, really just like it seems like he's always in the MVP discussion at the first, at halfway through the year. And then maybe he tapers off a little bit towards the end, or maybe he keeps going and keeps winning the MVP. But definitely Russell Wilson for me this week. Best matchup of the group. Potential for a shootout. I know everybody's favorite is, everybody's on LA and Dallas, but I'm probably gonna maybe pivot off.
There are a lot of Russ
we'll
truthers out there. But you're a Russ truther, right?
Yeah.
You believe? Okay. I'm not.
He has his good weeks, he has his bad weeks, but when he's on,
there's
you can't stop him. So
I'm not a Russ hater by any means. I respect what he does out there. I kept trying to fade him the first half of last year, expecting that touchdown regression. And he just the first 6 or 7 weeks was an unreal pace. I could definitely see him going crazy this week. I don't think it's a week to fade him. Although we'll talk about a running back a little later, and Carson and maybe a pivot there. But my guy is actually Herbert, and it's nothing against Dak. I just think Herbert is good, and that Chargers team has some weapons for him. He makes an easy pairing with Keenan Allen. And Dallas's defense is like you said, Joe, it's just atrocious. he can run a little bit too. I mean, he's got some legs, and I mean, I like the kid a lot. I think he's really talented. And you probably really can't go wrong with, like you said, with anybody in the group. But I probably am feeling pretty good with him, even in cash. Just he's got a really solid floor, and they're going to throw a ball a ton. And so the three of us picked everyone but Tom Brady, right? How about that? Somewhere Tom Brady is laughing, like, I'll show you guys. Just, I mean, honestly, is it like a situation where he's just like going to try to pad stats this year? Like, I watched that game last week, and they like didn't even try to run the ball. They were just going to like, hey, let's just let Brady throw to all of his weapons. And so I'm a little nervous to fade Brady. I don't think I would do it, but here we are, the three of us. Everyone but Brady.
I'm more apt to fade him. I just think the game script last week with Dallas keeping it close kind of helped a lot.
True. That's true.
But I do think he kind of helped. Well, I know it doesn't matter as much if it's not a showdown, but he does spread the ball out enough that it's kind of, sometimes it's short, sometimes it's deep, sometimes it's, kind of in the mid range, sometimes he's handing it off. He just doesn't really have a solid floor for me. I feel like as a DFS quarterback, and season long, I think he's great, but from a week to week standpoint, I can't really ever trust him, at least to play in cash.
And who do you stack him with? That's kind of the question too. A lot of people, maybe people don't play him because they don't know who to stack him with. And that kind of is a perfect segue to the next topic I have circled here, where a couple of his receivers are actually in this range. I want to talk about receivers for a little bit because we've kind of talked about a bunch of other positions already. But I'm looking at DraftKings. I'm looking at this 6 to 7K range, and this feels loaded. And you go down the range, and you're talking at the top end, you got Keenan Allen at 7K, and then you're working your way down, and you got Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel had a huge week one, AJ Brown. All these guys are studs and pretty affordable, right? They're not up over 7K yet. So of that range, like, who's your guy that you like more than the most, or more than the rest, that you're going to hang your hat on this week? John, I'm going to throw it to you first.
So my guy is AJ Brown. We saw last week he's still Tannehill's favorite target, even with the addition of Julio. He saw 8 targets last week. He did catch a touchdown pass, despite their offense just looking like a shell of itself from last year. But yeah, I mean, AJ's my guy. He's going to be, I feel like him or CD or Amari, one of those three, are going to be that first guy who takes that leap above 8K. Not to say that the other guys won't or the other guys can't, but he just seems like he's like that high stealing guy where he could just go 8 for 152 and have 2 touchdowns, and no one's even going to blink an eye about it. They're just going to be like, oh yeah, that's what AJ Brown does. So AJ Brown's my guy, especially this week. I like the game script. I like, the fact that even if Seattle goes up, that means, you're not going to see a ton of Derrick Henry this week. It's going to be more of a shootout. So AJ's my guy.
All right, Joe, how about you? I have a feeling you're going Dallas, maybe. I don't know.
Well, in that game, Dan, a lot of guys in there that I love this week. A lot of guys I'll have exposure to, but volume and matchup points me to Keenan Allen there at 7K.
Yeah.
We've talked about how terrible this Dallas secondary is. Gave up 370 passing yards last week, and we know that Keenan Allen's volume, as far as the receiver position goes, is pretty well locked in. Had 13 targets last week. And I think we'll see him go across double-digit targets again this week. So a lot of people might try to save a little cash and dip down to Mike Williams to get their Chargers exposure. Yeah, Williams came out strong in week one. He's at 6,100, so you might catch some people trying to save a little money there by moving down to him. But I think Keenan Allen's the proven commodity in this receiving core, and just love his talent, love the matchup.
Yeah, I didn't even mention Mike Williams, but I mean, I'm just taking a glance at it again, and you have Antonio Brown there at 6K too, and Mike Evans, Chris Godwin there is like staring at me, and I love Chris Godwin. Just he's a former Penn State guy. I'm a Penn Stater, but just in general, he had a great week one. I feel like that's kind of like if you had to circle a spot and you're like, this is where you're going to win or lose this week, you have to nail that range.
It feels like you're trying to hit moving targets in there. When you start breaking down Godwin, Antonio Brown, where do you go there? A.J. Brown, who John mentioned, who's obviously a tremendous player, but, is it going to be a Derrick Henry week? It's some different things you have to worry about, and I just like that kind of that concentrated volume there in that Chargers-Dallas game specifically with guys like Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I do think that grabbing two of those guys makes sense. See, I have Allen as my top cash wide receiver for sure, and then I have Lamb slightly ahead of Cooper, for no other reason than I think Cooper just had a really freakishly crazy week one, and we didn't mention him in the earlier segment, but that just seemed a little bit of like an outlier based on even what he did with Dak last year, and that CeeDee Lamb is this guy who's going to perhaps get the softer matchup of the two cornerbacks and be a guy who's going to perhaps out target him over the course of the season, being, running some of those intermediate routes. And so I like Lamb too, and he's a little bit cheaper. The guy that I also wrote up there is 6,200's Cooper Kupp. I really like what Kupp did week one. And, I think people were questioning whether or not he would be, as good as he was with Goff, and then they were buddies, and Stafford came in, and then he just kind of did what he does, like 7 for 100 plus yards and a touchdown. And I think he's a nice value there, especially on FanDuel. I think he's only 6,000 on FanDuel. All right. Let's transition here to kind of our game stack segment where we talk about games. And there's obviously some games that stick out here as far as totals, and there's going to be some games that are real popular. It doesn't matter if it's popular or not, but we have a segment here where we talk about our favorite game to stack, and then like how do you build it, or what types of different builds are you looking at, and who you running it back with from each side. So I'm going to start with Joe. I don't know if he's going to talk about Dallas and the Chargers, or if he's going to go in a different direction here. He's pretty heavy on that game.
Big surprise, Dan. Yeah, that's my stack this week. Dallas and the Chargers, and you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, man. And sometimes a good spot is just a really good spot. We kind of talked about maybe kicking ourselves overlooking the Chiefs last week, and I feel like this is just such an obvious spot. Maybe it's going to be a little bit too obvious, and some people are going to try to pivot away from it. But I just love the game environment, love the pace that the Cowboys play with. On the other side of the ball, love Herbert's talent, and love this matchup against the secondary. So there's just a lot of things to like here. I think you can pretty well stack this thing any way you want to go. You mentioned Cooper and Lamb being a toss-up. I love playing those two guys together.
That's true.
Yeah, they combined for 54% of the target share last week for Dallas, and we're talking about Michael Gallup going on IR earlier this week. So you can imagine the type of target share those two are gonna this week with Gallup. We talked about Keenan Allen. We talked about Mike Williams. So I think there's tons of ways you can go with this game. It's one of those you can maybe just jump into 3 max and stack this thing 3 different ways.
Yeah, no doubt. And then the thing is, you can get different in other spots. Like if you even if you're eating some chalk here with this game stack, there's still another 4 or 5 players on your roster in which you can differentiate with. So it's not like you are, going to be playing a totally chalky build if you just start with that, that chalky stack. John, what's your favorite game?
Yeah. So as much as I talked about, Russell Wilson and AJ Brown in that Seattle and Tennessee game, I'm not an idiot. It's Chargers Cowboys. It has to be. The game's just gonna. You expect it to go far over whatever the total is, which I'm assuming is in the mid to high 50s. It's like a college game.
I think it's 55 and a half.
Yeah. I mean, the way I'd stack it would probably be a little bit different than how most. I know you said, Joe, that you could probably just go into a 3 max and do it 3 different ways, and I don't hate that idea at all. I'm going to go, if I'm making one lineup, I'm actually going to go with LA and run back Dallas. So I'm going to start with Herbert, and then I'm going to go with Allen and Williams, and then I'm going to run back CeeDee Lamb. It's not a slate on anybody else, not a slate on Amari Cooper, what have you, or Dak or anything like that. I just think you're going to get the most value, the cheaper, Herbert versus Dak, and then, you get a little bit of a cheaper wide receiver in Williams to pair with Keenan Allen. And then I think, like you said earlier, Dan, I just think CeeDee Lamb's going to have the week of his life. I could see him getting, 13 to 15 targets. He might have the softer matchup as far as, lining up across whomever it may be from LA, while Amari Cooper takes the toughest matchups. So I definitely like that game in general, but I would definitely lean towards the LA offense, the running back CeeDee Lamb.
All right. I mean, and the other two games that are I think are going to be popular, as if we're looking at like the game stacks, you're going to see, I think, some people will be back on Tennessee, with Tennessee, Seattle being a big total and people liking that spot. I think that, potentially Minnesota, Arizona could get a lot of love with, what Kyler and Hopkins did week 1, and could always run Cook back there. I have a little bit of a weird wrinkle here. I think, and you even mentioned it, like, I think people expect Tampa Bay to go in and just, hammer Atlanta. And what if they don't? I mean, what if they don't? I think there's potential there for, like, if you want to run back a Falcons guy, like a Calvin Ridley, or maybe Russell Gage, or even Kyle Pitts was like a huge chalky kind of bust week 1 with your favorite Brady. I mean, pick Brady and 2 pass catchers, maybe Brady with AB and Godwin, right? And just hope that Mike Evans, sucks like last week, and then run it back with Ridley or something. There's some potential there. They could go over. Like, I think some people expecting a blowout, or just expecting, Atlanta to roll over. So that would be one way I think maybe you can be sneaky and try to maybe get onto a different game than everyone else is on. All right.
Well, I'll be honest. I'm one of those guys who thinks that Tampa Bay's just going to roll.
I know.
So, if it doesn't, then, and you come back with, you win the Millie Maker with Tampa Bay and run back Atlanta, then I won't ask for any money then.
There you go. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you just have to kind of, you have to zig when people are zagging. The Tampa Bay defense, I know Dallas is talented, but I just don't think they looked that great week 1. And anything can happen. Matt Ryan is not bad by any means.
No.
Matt Ryan's offensive line is very bad, which I think is the problem in Atlanta.
Yeah.
But there's no rule saying that Tampa Bay can't roll, as you guys were saying, have a very big game, and you still can't take down a GPP by running it back with a Falcon. They get down, they're chasing. You got to bring back peace from Atlanta. So we know what can happen in those type of games when you got 2 experienced veteran quarterbacks in Brady and Ryan, and those guys get going back and forth, and you've got very good receivers on both sides of the ball. So good call, Dan. Really, really interesting.
It is. I mean, anything can happen, like you said, whether it's competitive throughout or whether they do get up big and are playing catch up. It's just, it's somewhere where you can get a little different. Now, speaking of getting different, we're coming close to the end of the show here. We have a segment here where we try to talk about like a dart throw play. I mean, give me a GPP play that either is relatively cheap or is going to go way overlooked, and a guy who's barely going to be rostered at all, who you think has some, major tournament upside. So, and I'll just open it up to any price range. Usually we kind of go cheaper, just, for that upside, but honestly, it doesn't really matter to me as far as the price goes. Joe, do you have a dart throw?
Yeah, a couple, man. We spent a ton of time talking, me in particular, we spent a ton of time talking about this Cowboys-Chargers game. But there's one guy we hadn't brought up. Michael Gallup's on the IR, and Cedric Wilson is sitting there at 3.1K, guys. You talk about differentiating your stacks from that game. We know Lamb and Cooper are going to be extremely popular there. I think Cedric Wilson, a huge salary saver at that price. And, you play this game 100 times, there's going to be 5 or 10 scenarios there where Cedric Wilson kind of busts out in this spot. So, lock that move. And if we're talking GPPs, we're talking trying to think contrarian with our thought process. What about going back to Marquez Callaway, a guy that let everybody down, especially like him over on FanDuel? Mike Williams is going to be very, very popular over there. I believe he's priced at 5.6K on FanDuel this week, so he's going to be an extremely popular play. You got Marquez Callaway right there at 5.7K. Lock him on FanDuel, where yards and touchdowns are kind of what we're hunting over there. So a couple big plays from Callaway, and he can make your day.
Yeah, I like both of those calls, actually. John, who are you looking at?
So don't mind me digging into the bias bag here a little bit, but I'm going to go with Kenny Gainwell from Philly.
Okay.
The reasoning being is we saw last week even, and I know, some of it was garbage time and what have you, but the Lions, both Swift and Williams, did their fair share and ate quite a bit against San Francisco last week. And I have a couple of stats here about Gainwell. He had 3 targets and 9 rushing attempts, including one where he got a touchdown. He got that in the red zone, an 8-yard carry. 12 touches despite only playing 37% of the snaps. Just being a Philly guy and, hearing about him through camp and everything, it seems like this Philly coaching staff really, really likes this kid. And to the point where there's even been rumblings that, hey, when Miles Sanders' contract goes up, we got this guy waiting in the wings, so he's just going to be the guy who takes over. So I do expect Gainwell to see a little bit of a usage increase week by week. It depends on, how Sanders is running the ball, and he's no one to sniff at either. But I definitely like Gainwell, especially in these early weeks if his production ends up going up and his usage starts to go up as well. So, he's my guy despite, being a Philly guy. I don't mean to throw in a little bias pick there.
No, it's fine.
But that's my guy. If I'm throwing a dart, that's who I want for sure.
My wife's an Eagles fan. I watch the Eagles every week and the Steelers both. And I watched the Eagles game and I came away really impressed. I know it was Atlanta and they're not a great defense, but I thought they looked really good. And so I know, Joe, you wrote up Jalen Hurts, and I'm on Jalen Hurts this week. I was kind of off him last week because I thought he was going to be popular and I didn't know what he was going to do. But I'm glad you brought up Philly because my guys actually it's Smith and Rieger both. I mean, I'm looking at their prices and Smith's only 5,400 on DK. Rieger's 4,100. You can stack one or both of those guys with Hurts.
Yep.
And look what happened to the San Francisco last week. They were up big and then they gave up all these yards and all those points to a Lions team that's not very good. So I think Philly's playing at home, West Coast coming to the East. I like them a lot. I mean, even if they don't win that game, I think they'll be competitive and I think they'll score some points. So I think people like to play Hurts naked a lot for his rushing upside, but why not stack him with one of those two guys? They both had good weeks in week 1.
Yeah, if you're going to get him for a cheap price, there's no reason not to. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably stack him with both of those guys and still have plenty of room to cram some studs in. All right, so we're here to our last segment of the show, and some of these we call our bold predictions. Some of them went really well last week. I ended up calling the Saints upset over the Packers, but I also took 2. I should have quit while I was ahead. I said that the Chiefs were going to go under the total, and that didn't go so well. So bold predictions can be, John, just a player stat line. It could be an outcome of a game. It could be whatever you want it to be. Just try to be bold. But we're gonna make our bold calls for week 2 and then wrap things up. So I'm gonna start with Joe. Joe, what's your bold call for week 2?
I'm always terrible at these things, Dan. I think a lot of people fell in love with Matt Stafford and these LA Rams last week. The offense looked great. I think a lot of us thought that it would. And prime time, a lot of people that game had a lot of eyes on it. So I think you're going to see people gravitate towards this Rams passing attack. But I'm really interested in Darrell Henderson. He's down there at 5.7K on DraftKings. So I think he's going to have a big week. Sean McVay, kind of underneath it all, will run the football. And Henderson looks like the man in this backfield. Sonny Michel, I think, had 1 carry on 3 snaps. So I'm calling Darrell Henderson 100-plus yards, couple touchdowns.
I like that. I mean, and he's super cheap too. John, what's your bold call for week 2?
Well, I just dipped in the bias bag, and if you're going to be in it, you might as well be in it to win it. So my bold prediction is going back to the bias bag with Philly. I think they win by 2 touchdowns, and I think that Smith, Goddard, Gainwell, and Sanders all score a touchdown. I just think that, that, like you said, just West Coast coming to the East. We saw what the Eagles did against San Francisco last year, despite the Eagles being just brutally bad last year. I think this team comes ready to play. It's the first time Jalen Hurts is going to start a game in front of, a full Lincoln Financial Field. I think it's going to be rocking. And this team, at least from what we saw last week, again, I know it was Atlanta, but they do have the potential to put a lot of points up on the board. So I'm going to go with the Eagles, 14-plus point victory, and each of those 4 guys scoring.
Okay. I mean, I would like that because I plan on having lots of Eagles exposure, and everyone in my family, my wife's family, this will be very happy with that outcome. Okay, here's mine.
I won't even. It won't even matter what my DFS lines do then. They win by 2 touchdowns.
There you go. Right.
Matter anymore.
Hey, San Fran's down a couple DBs too, John.
Yeah.
So Jason Verrett went down out for the year last week. So it's an interesting spot, and I'm a big Jalen Hurts guy, so I like the call.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing with Hurts, and I'll move on to mine. Is like I had some doubts about his throwing ability. Obviously, he's an incredible athlete. I didn't know how well he was going to be with reading defenses, but last week he made some great throws. He made some great reads. He
looked extremely sharp. Yeah.
He looked like he'd been doing it for a while, and he looked markedly better than last year. He was running around, scrambling around, running for his life, making plays. But last week he looked comfortable. The line blocked well. I mean, I don't want to be buying too big into the Eagles this early in the year, but I do like what I see so far. All right, so here's mine. I'm going to say, I don't know how bold this is, but I'm going to say Tom Brady throws for 350 yards and 5 touchdowns this week, because I'm convinced that he and he's got his coach. What's his name? I can't think of his name right now.
Arians.
Yeah, Bruce Arians. He's convinced Bruce Arians to let him do whatever he wants and try to set records and do, I just honestly think that's where he's at. And I think even if they're hammering the Falcons, he's the kind of guy that just wants to rub it in. He posted some video on social media where he had in the background, it was like 20, you could see 28-3 in it. Did you see that, John?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like he's that guy. I think he really just wants to put it in their faces. And they're the defending champs. They won week 1. I really do see them coming out and just trying to do whatever they want and throw the ball a bunch, even if they're up, just because they can. And so I'm going to have some exposure to Tom Brady. I know you're talking about fading him. Even if they win going away, I just don't see any reason why he might not throw for 4 or 5 scores and be the optimal quarterback. I just think they're that good, and they want to show everybody that they're that good. And Bruce Arians is the kind of coach who's like, oh, no, we should run it a bunch and call off the dog. I don't think he's going to do that. I think he's going to let them pile it on there. So, well, I guess we'll see how those play out. But hopefully we offered you guys some valuable DFS advice this week. And for all 3 of us here, I just want to say good luck in your contest. Thanks for checking us out. And we will see you next week and back here on the Roundtable. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining me.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Good luck this week.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.